Okay, let's break down the most recent way that Tucker Carlson wants to ruin everything for all of us. So right now, he's not at his normal Fox studio. He's not even at one of the many broadcast quality studios he has in his multiple mansions. No, instead, right now he's in Budapest, airing his show from Hungary's capital city all week. In his Monday monologue kicking off this trip, he told his listeners that they should pay attention to Hungary, quote, if you care about Western civilization and democracy and family, and the ferocious assault on all three of those things by leaders of our global institutions. He tweeted out a friendly photo with Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orbán and is confirmed to speak at a government-supported conference in Budapest on Saturday. But you didn't have to wait until Saturday for him to meet up with members of their ruling regime and say a bunch of nonsense about how they're awesome because all the right people hate them. Like all the different opposition parties, people formerly that used to be in academia and the media and all of that no longer have any functioning position in Hungarian society because the regime has made off with democracy, basically. It doesn't work anymore. And so this is really the issue, that you have Tucker Carlson, an incredibly wealthy and unfortunately popular media pundit, one of the most watched cable pundits in the country, who has decided to misinform his audience about one of the last sort of Soviet-style despots in Europe. One has to assume that the average Tucker Carlson viewer knows absolutely nothing about virtually any other government around the world, and he is playing on that. So look, I'm not an expert on this, so I turn to those who actually are, NGOs and academics who study the fall of democracy, and they will tell you that Orbán and his allies gerrymandered parliamentary districts and packed the constitutional court. They seized control over the National Elections Agency, the civil service, and over 90% of all media in Hungary. They used economic regulation to enrich themselves and punish their opponents, persecuting a major university, for example, until it was forced to leave the country altogether. Now, I know you probably hear a lot of that and you think, hey, that sounds kind of like our government. And sure, there are certainly some shades, but it was a lot stronger. So for instance, as an example, by 2017, 90% of all media in Hungary was owned by either the state or a Fidesz ally, according to an account by Budapest-based scholar Marius Dragomir. This media empire includes every single regional newspaper in the country, and they do mean that. They don't just mean that like, the parts of the media that were allied with the regime became more popular. No, they seized control of virtually all of the media. And so while you might have elections, for instance, in Hungary, there have been elections that Orbán has won re-election in. Virtually every bit of media in the country is on the behalf of the government, feeding people their narratives, viciously attacking the opposition with complete misinformation. And as a result of all of the sort of stuff that we've unfortunately had to gloss over, like the gerrymandering, getting rid of the courts, all of that, there was a 2021 report from VDEM, the leading academic institute assessing the state of global democracy, found that Hungary crossed the line into autocracy back in 2018 and is now an example of what is called competitive authoritarianism, where there are sort of some of the rituals of democracy, but you have virtually no democracy in fact. And none of that is going to be learned by people watching Tucker Carlson throughout this week. Instead, he's going to give them, well, I'll get to what he's saying about Orbán. But before we get to that, I do want to throw it to our panel and get your thoughts about this massive figure in US political media trying to shed a spotlight on Hungary as an example of what the US should aspire to become.
So I want to clarify first that this is not just about Viktor Orbán. They're now also celebrating what people are calling fascist adjacent leader of Portugal. It's called the Salazar option. I'll get it back into that in a little bit. And it is not just Tucker Carlson. Charlie Sykes, who is a conservative, but is horrified by what the right-wing movement has done to conservatism, has explained many right-wing leaders are now heading in this direction of what they're calling illiberal democracy, meaning not democracy, okay? And it's complicated because it's actually a spectrum, and I think we have some versions of that already in America. So I'll get to that in a second as well. And what they're looking for is what they call an American Caesar. Oh boy, okay, yeah, that's just a dictator. And and they're now starting to be open about it. And the second person who is behind this effort most aggressively, other than Tucker Carlson, is Steve Bannon. Okay, so here come the fascists. And the question is, how are we going to react? Now, when we talk about fascism, so now let's go back to Orbán and talk about that. And remember, Tucker could have gone to over 200 different countries and could have celebrated the system in Barbados, or more reasonably, Germany, Norway. I mean, they're right in the general vicinity of Hungary, right? He chose Hungary for a reason. He chose Hungary because the right wing had become a minority, but found a way to seize power, and without having it seem like they destroyed democracy, in fact destroyed democracy. So it was actually perfect for the right wing in this country, because they are now slipping into a minority. They're perfectly aware of it. That's why Tucker and Fox News for a long time have been talking about how they're losing the culture wars. And it's true, and I believe they just flat out have lost them, and they believe the same thing. And they realize the younger generations are so overwhelmingly progressive that they're on borrowed time. I mean, they're barely winning with the electoral college and gerrymandering, et cetera, to begin with. But when the younger generation's wave comes, it's good night, Irene. They have no hope or prayer of winning national elections. So they're gonna have to do this, and they're gonna have to do it right away to make it in time to be able to execute this plan. And this is not a plan that's just specific to even Hungary and Portugal. Some versions of this plan have been done by a lot of authoritarian leaders across the world, including, by the way, Turkey. And so, and I've seen it happen with my own eyes, since obviously I have friends and family there. And a critical part of it is setting the political rules so that it doesn't look like you're doing a coup. It doesn't look like you're ending democracy. You don't declare to everybody, oh, by the way, we're fascists, we're neo-Nazis, and we'd like to take over and end your freedoms. Of course, you don't do that. No, first of all, you say you are for freedom as you take freedom away. But more importantly, it's the rule rigging that's important. So gerrymandering is a great example of that, and what a lot of authoritarian governments do, and this is a line that is prevalent in America, where the voters don't pick the politicians pick their voters. So I don't want the general population deciding, so I'm going to carve out the districts in a way where I pick my own voters. And so I'll carve up a state so that Democrats will have more votes overall in the state, but Republicans will get more legislators. By the way, as a part of this that is not talked about in any of these pieces or nearly often enough is the Democratic basically compliance with this and willing participation in it. Why? Because their seats that once it's gerrymandered are super safe. So those Democratic congressmen and state legislators think, okay, the Republicans get more seats, but I don't really care. I don't care about the voters at all. I got into office through corruption anyway. I took a bunch of corporate money and lobbyist money. And so my seat, if it's 80%, 90% Democratic, will be safe forever and ever and ever. So yeah, let fascism win as long as I'm a useful tool in that toolbox. And so the Democratic Party has a lot to explain for itself. And by the way, if they don't take action now, they're gonna execute the strategy. Democrats are feckless and corrupt, and that's exactly a recipe for disaster. If you've studied fascism, when it has won in any country, usually the opposition is feckless and useless and craven and only cares about their own power and is easily steamrolled. And then the second part of it, of course, is the media. And I saw Erdogan in Turkey take over the media in an astounding way. Piece by piece, intimidation, legal threats, and then shutting down things. And then there was audio tape released of him on the phone with heads of media companies and saying, you'll either do as you're told or I'll shut you down. And then what did we have? We had compliance. And so Orbán has executed that, unfortunately, brilliantly in Hungary. That's why Tucker goes to learn at the feet of the master. Because when they first tried it here in America, it was through Trump. And Trump is, of course, his IQ is way too low. He's too dumb to execute it. And people like Tucker Carlson and Steve Bannon are greatly frustrated by that. And they think if we only had a strong man like Orbán, who isn't a moron and could do fascism right. And by the way, that person who's more intelligent and could do fascism right might be Tucker Carlson himself. So this is, maybe an Anakin Skywalker that has already turned, going to study with the Sith Lord to see how he can, rule in the dark ways. And so it's very dangerous. And this last part of it, and I know I talked a lot, and we got to bring in Sabrina, and there's so much more to cover. But is that they're also getting their audience ready for it. They're saying, "Oh no, this is okay. This is okay." Now, look, I know it's not really democracy. They're actually admitting it in a lot of different ways, but it's because they just went after the family, and we got to protect the family. And they went after Christianity, and we got to protect Christianity. We got to protect our culture. We had to end democracy to protect our culture. What's more important, democracy where the libs win, or culture where we win? Right? And so that's the excuse Orbán used, and already you see the right wing using that over and over in this country. Sabrina.
Oh, absolutely. I do agree with you that Tucker is turned. How do you go to a FASCIST conference and you're surprised at the attendees? He's not surprised. And if anything, the actual conference itself is funded by a very nationalistic conservative think tank that receives large sums of money from Orbán himself. So it's not a coincidence, I think, that Tucker Carlson is speaking very, very positively of this authoritarian person. I think this is how fascist ideas become mainstream, because of people like Tucker Carlson.
Yeah, he has a big enough audience. That's all it takes. They trust him at his word. I mean, after you can get people to totally lower their guard to a virus and watch their family die needlessly, it's pretty easy to get them to support someone like Orbán, who they have zero information on. This isn't something that they've been getting conflicting information. This is the only, they're Americans. They went through the American education system. They don't know anything about this. They don't know the country exists probably. Maybe they heard a joke about the name one time. That's it. That's their information about Hungary, and that is what Tucker Carlson is going to use. But if you're watching Tucker Carlson's program throughout this week, what will you learn about Hungary and the ruling regime? Well, part of one of his monologues was also uploaded to foxnews.com as sort of an op-ed. And it starts off, Tucker Carlson, quote, "If you need proof the media lies, look at how they treat Hungary." And it's the second line is, "We've read many times how repressive Hungary is, but that's wrong."
Oh, okay, well you said it, so it must be true.
Yeah, I mean, look, he went to Hungary with his producers, open mind, and did research for several days, and he's come to that conclusion. So he says, what does Orbán believe? Just a few years ago, his views would have seemed moderate and conventional. He thinks families are more important than banks. He believes countries need borders. For saying these things out loud, Orbán has been vilified. And he really nailed me. I think banks are more important than families. And if you say otherwise, I'm done with you, buddy. I'm done. That's what it is. You might not like Tucker Carlson, but you do have to give it to him. He gives a fair shake to what the opposition says, to their arguments. Really fast, just for fun. There's this photo of him when he's doing an interview there, and I want to zoom in. He does the face thing in person too. Like, that's not just when he's looking into it. I thought that was like, come to me. Like right now, it looks like I'm looking at you, right? But I'm not, I'm looking in a black ball lens or whatever. He does that looking into people's eyes. But anyway, that's the least important part of this, I think, fairly objectively. So it is just family and borders. You know, the sorts of things that the right has been using to try to win elections for decades now will be the reason that we don't need to have elections anymore. And I fear that to the extent that people get what's going on, the war on democracy, and might try to respond to it, I think too much attention goes into trying to reveal to conservative voters, hey, wait, do you guys not get that the Republican elected officials don't want democracy and they're trying to fool you? I don't think the voters want it either. I think they want to win. If they thought they could win with elections, they'd be fine with elections. You know, they're totally cool with democracy, I guess. But if the only way to win is to get rid of it, democracy is not some core value of the right. it's a means to an end. And when it's no longer a means to that end, they'll dispense with it. They're not being bamboozled by Tucker Carlson. They are right there with him in terms of values. They don't care about democracy. They were fine with disenfranchising, tens of millions of black people for like 100 years plus. That entire time, they got that democracy would have been inconvenient, so they never embraced it. And so what do we do?
But by the way, to John's point, there was another moment in American history that you might remember where conservatives decided that they don't like democracy and they just like to seize power through force. That was called the Civil War. Oh, hey, the North outvoted us, and now we might have to liberate human beings that we've been enslaving this whole time and murdering and whipping and lynching, etc. Well, we don't want to stop lynching them. We don't want to do our own work. We want to make them do it, right? So screw freedom. Let's attack America. They literally did that in this country.
Yep.
So you think the right wing won't do it again? Well, they're in the middle of doing it now. January 6th was an appetizer for what's coming next. So Charlie Sykes, again, amazing quotes from actual conservatives that are pushing these ideas. One of the conservatives now positively speaking about Slobodan Milosevic, the war criminal in Kosovo. It's amazing. It's amazing. He's a convicted war criminal who did ethnic cleansing. But for them, ethnic cleansing is not the bug, it's the feature. And they think, well, that's the family values we care about, and we have to burn down democracy to get that. We can do it. In fact, so Orbán ran on this. He says, oh, he just ran on families being more important than banks and puppies being more important than cancer, okay? In reality, here's what Orbán ran on. He ran on the threat posed by Muslim immigrants, liberals in the European Union, the LGBT community, and the Jewish billionaire George Soros. Hey,
you might be Tucker Carlson, actually.
Yeah. And so, I like they start with the normal bigotry against Muslims, which is worldwide, right? And oh, goddamn Muslims, we gotta protect our culture. We're gonna end democracy to hate Muslims, and of course, gay people, of course. But if you act now for the low price of fascism, we'll throw in hatred against Jews. Of course you will. When have you ever done fascism without throwing in anti-Semitism, right? So, I mean, isn't that amazing? They use Soros here. They use Soros in Hungary. They're like, why?
We're not that different, really, around the world. It's almost beautiful.
Yeah, unity around anti-Semitism. And by the way, the world has done that before too. And so, it's scary, scary times. And so Soros is originally from Eastern Europe, and yes, he's Jewish, and yes, they call him a puppet master, and yes, that's the oldest anti-Semitic slur, and this is disgusting. So now, what they call this system that Orbán set up, competitive authoritarianism. Well, that seems ironic, right? A bit of an oxymoron. What you can't. Authoritarianism by definition is not competitive. Well, that's the whole point. It's an autocratic system where you have, in essence, fall elections. It's not that they rigged the elections, but and this is what you guys, if you watch Young Turks, you heard me say this so many times. The Mitch McConnells of the world were so pissed at Trump because, hey, and the Georgia Republicans most of all, because they're like, you schmuck, we rigged the elections before they happened, not afterwards. You're so dumb. You can't just say afterwards, oh, the ghost of Hugo Chavez stole it and the pillow guy agrees with me. No, you purge voter rolls, you do gerrymandering, you do electoral college. Now, of course, electoral college from a long time ago, but it is now serving their purpose, right? And then you indoctrinate people with media that's friendly to you, etc., so that by the time you get to the elections, it's pointless, and you kill off different parts of democracy one step at a time. And different countries have seen this in different ways. Putin started killing off local elections when he seized power in Russia, and so then all of a sudden you weren't electing your local representatives that were closer to the electorate and were more responsive to democracy. So there's different ways of strangling democracy to death. And by the way, like I said, a lot of that happens here. Now let me throw you one more curveball. So as the right wing is clearly doing this, and in a way that is brazen, you don't go talk to authoritarian leaders like Orbán by accident, like, oh golly gee, I didn't know he was near fascist, right? Oh, I didn't know he was trying to exclude Muslims and hate LGBTQ folks and blame the Jews for all the problems. Golly gee, I missed that. I went for a whole week and I missed it, right? So no, they're doing it on purpose. But now as the Republicans are fully loathsome, well, I mean, control of the media in a way where they lie to your benefit so that by the time you get to the election, the die is cast. That is mainstream media 101 and what the Democratic Party has executed here for decades. So by the time you get to vote in Cleveland, they already told you who was not the Democrat and who was the Democrat and how you should vote against a person that isn't the Democrat in a Democratic primary. Although the actual truth is the exact opposite, right? So Trump donors give tons of money to Chantel Brown, and they encourage Republicans to vote for her. On and on it goes, right? And she brags about how she works with Republicans all the time. The press takes that and goes, no, she's not the one that's supporting Republicans. Nina Turner is. But wait a minute, Nina Turner is more in favor of Democratic proposals more, not less. Nope, we just lie to people and we tell them that the reverse is true. So, in a sense, they've been strangling our democracy through corporate media for a long time. Now, that's a different version of fascism where corporations rule everything. Corporatism, and that is a structure, and that is one of the core tenets of fascism. And so be careful on both sides, both with corporate rule and just flat out fascist rule that the right wings are proposing.
No, yeah, absolutely. I think that there's a large number of conservative, like really conservative people who, they claim to care about like your individual rights, but when it comes down to it, and when Tucker Carlson starts showing them a little bit of like what Hungary is like now, they are not all that opposed to it, I think, or at least maybe because of what Tucker has to say, but as long as like those ideals are in line with their own, I think they're totally fine with people having their rights stripped away from them.
Well, especially if they feel like they're getting a wink and a nod that the sort of people whose rights are going to be stripped away aren't them. It's 100%. Not our religion that they're going to come for. It's not our race they're going to come for. Some people might have to, you might lose your rights, but that's a sacrifice I'm willing to have you make. Maybe.
Yeah. Look, this topic's so important. I'm going to make last couple of points here. One of the things that folks, that right-wing writers are now saying is the way that these fascist adjacent governments work, and that's really could be helpful to us, is they take advantage of the ambiguities in the Constitution. Okay, and everybody has a different Constitution, obviously, right? And what did Trump try to do with Mike Pence? Well, you're supposed to just declare who the winner is. It's a ceremonial role, but we can call it ambiguous and have you just declare me the winner. So he already tried that, but in a super ham-handed way. So that's why it didn't work. But they've learned all these lessons now. So next time they're going to do it better, right? And although they're still pushing right now at the local level too. And Sykes again points to Arizona State Senator Wendy Rogers, who's calling for the arrest and solitary confinement of the 5 members of the Maricopa County Board of Supervisors. You voted against us and you counted accurately. The courts all say that you counted accurately. So we hate you for telling people the truth. And so how are we going to respond to that? Well, why don't we just put you in prison? Yeah, that's exactly how you do fascism. And so finally, what can the Democrats do to fix this and to fight back so we don't slip into fascism?
Extended olive branch.
Try to work with the Republicans. And like Pelosi said, I just want a stronger Republican Party. No, Speaker Pelosi, we do not want a stronger Republican Party. And so, no, the answer is partly For the People Act. Now, For the People Act says, well, let's get rid of gerrymandering, done on a partisan level, whether Democrats or Republicans do it, right? Just end partisan gerrymandering, make sure that everyone can vote, no Not anybody who, like, we don't want anybody voting that can't vote. You know who would take advantage of that, or who shouldn't vote? You know who would take advantage of that first? The right wing. Are you kidding me? If we set up a system where people could vote if they're not actual citizens, the right wing would pour in. They'd bring in Hungarians and Turks and Russians, whatever, right? I'm kidding around about the ethnicities, but you never want to set up an unfair system because the right wing will take advantage of it way quicker than the left wing will, right? Plus, it's not the right thing to do. No, we want a system where everybody is allowed to vote that can vote and should vote, right? So it's the bare minimum. It's the lowest bar there is. And honestly, just the Democratic Party is so weak, so pathetic, so corrupt. They can't even pass the For the People Act. By the way, at this point, I'm now starting to get so worried about fascism. I knew they were going to kill the anti-corruption parts of the For the People Act. I told you guys that 3 years ago when they first started talking about it, when they thought it had no chance of passing because Trump was in office. I said, there is no way on earth this corrupt Democratic Party actually means these anti-corruption measures. And now when they got control of all branches of government, the first thing Manchin said is, oh no, the anti-corruption parts have to go. Totally unacceptable, right? Okay, I got it. You gotta fix the voting. So fine, I know you're gonna kill the anti-corruption measures anyway. I know it. I told you I know with every fiber of my being. For God's sake, you corrupt jerks, at least pass the voting rights parts and the gerrymandering parts before the fascists take over. But yet Biden's like, I'm a filibuster. I love the filibuster. Oh, if the Republicans say no, if even one Republican in the Senate says no, I surrender. Schumer surrenders, Pelosi surrenders, Manchin's on the other side anyway, Sinema's on the other side anyway. And then Jim Clyburn is supposed to be the one guy who really wants For the People Act because it also affects African-American voting rights, and that is the most core thing that African-Americans care about, and that's absolutely true. That is the thing and God bless them. They are protectors of democracy, African-American voters who insist on voting rights. For all of us, not just for themselves, for all of us, right? Clyburn, what have you done? I see you going around the country attacking progressives. I see you spending millions of lobbyist money to attack progressives who are in favor of voting rights. I haven't seen you do anything on For the People Act. If the For the People Act doesn't pass, the legacy of Jim Clyburn will be that he was a monstrous failure, a total, complete, and utter failure. That he says it's his #1 priority, and he's getting absolutely annihilated on it. And what's he doing? Is he putting pressure on Biden? No, because he told Biden, oh, don't worry, just take it. As long as it's not Bernie, you can do anything you want. I won't ask for anything in return. That's what Killer Mike said. And then Clyburn caught feelings. Damn it, a rapper figured it out. And soon reporters might figure it out that I'm useless and I've got nothing. And I'm gonna let the fascists win because I'm too busy taking corporate donations. But it isn't just Clyburn, it's the entire Democratic leadership. So God help us if we don't get one strong Democrat in there soon, and I don't know how in the world we're gonna do it now. These guys are gonna get steamrolled by the fascists. Good luck, everybody.
Yeah, I don't know about you guys, but I've never heard a Republican say we need a stronger Democratic Party. Have you guys?
Don't remember.
No.
No, never goes the other way around.